We are diving into a truly fascinating conversation today. We're looking at insights from a panel of heavy hitters across computer science, business, and philosophy, and unpacking how they suggest we navigate this rapid, frankly overwhelming, advancement of artificial intelligence, but doing it specifically from a biblical perspective. In this explainer, the core challenge we're going to tackle is their argument for protecting our human identity and our God-given purpose in an age where machines are getting really good at mimicking what it means to be human.
So, here is the roadmap for our analysis today. First, the AI revolution. Second, consciousness versus AI mimicry. Third, the cost of losing friction. Fourth, safeguarding human identity. And finally, thinking biblically about AI.
All right, Section 1, the AI revolution, rapid acceleration. Let's just jump right into how AI is completely upending traditional timelines. Across both science and business, the experts point out a velocity of change that is just shattering historical precedents. Take linguistics and theology, for example. Machine translation has reached such a crazy level of sophistication that instantaneous global Bible translation into literally every language on Earth is now seen as an achievable goal within our lifetime. And in science, AI recently discovered hundreds of thousands of new hard materials in just 17 days. 17 days! The panel noted that using traditional methods, that would have taken humans about 800 years.
And what is absolutely staggering is how this acceleration translates directly to the human workforce. Think about the corporate world. Bringing a new hire up to the median knowledge level of an organization traditionally takes, about 24 to 30 months of onboarding and learning, but in AI-native environments, experts are watching that learning curve get eradicated down to just 3 to 4 months. It's essentially acting as this massive knowledge equalizer, just instantaneously up-leveling people.
But of course, this incredible speed brings us face to face with a core existential dread, right? It's the fear that fuels modern transhumanism, this creeping anxiety that computers are eventually going to surpass us, supposedly proving that human biology is somehow defective and we're inferior to our own gadgets. And this perfectly sets the philosophical stakes for our explainer today. Are we really just biological machines that are about to be outmoded by digital ones?
Well, the source material draws a very hard line here between science fiction and reality. You have proponents of what's called strong AI, who believe computers can actually become self-aware and ontologically superior to us. But the expert panel argues this is fundamentally impossible. Why? Because everything AI does is a derivative of human creativity. As they point out, since humans are the creators, the technology simply cannot leap over that ontological gap to become naturally superior to us. It's a powerful tool, sure, but a derivative one. Which brings us to Section 2, Consciousness versus AI Mimicry, the Ontological Gap. Let's transition into the really deep metaphysical distinction the panel makes between the divine mystery of actual human consciousness and a computer's ability to just fake it.
Think about the human mind for a second. The panelists highlight that humans possess an immaterial soul that interacts with our physical brain. We have this rich, first-person subjective experience of the world. They actually point to neuroscience studies on near-death experiences, where patients recall highly detailed activities in the room while they were clinically brain-dead, to support the idea that consciousness is distinct from just the physical brain. So while the brain has a limited physical capacity, the mind has a potentially infinite capacity for memory and belief. On the flip side, AI operates entirely on third-person data. It might pass the Turing test, it might mimic human emotion perfectly, but it never actually feels a thing. There's no inner life there at all.
To really demystify this, the source shares this incredibly empowering anecdote. There was an undergraduate computer science student, and over the course of a year, her professor had her build a large language model entirely from scratch. She extracted the equations, ran the calculus by hand, manipulated the open source code, and ran the whole thing on her own machine. And when she finally finished, this light bulb just went off for her, and she said, "Oh my gosh, it's just math." I love that. AI is not magic. The panel stresses over and over, it is simply calculus, probability, and algorithms wrapped up in a very intimidating interface.
Okay, Section 3, the cost of losing friction, embracing the struggle. Because, listen, just because it's math doesn't mean it's harmless. Let's shift our focus to the very real psychological and physiological dangers the panel associates with outsourcing all our thinking to these tools. It turns out our physical brain health actually heavily relies on the exact friction we're usually trying to avoid. According to a fascinating MIT study they cited, when people read a book organically, really struggling through the text and doing the work, their brain conductivity lights up like a California wildfire.
But when users heavily rely on chatbots to summarize things or generate text for them, their brain conductivity becomes almost undetectable. The experts argue that basically faking your way through a cognitive task shrinks your memory capacity and completely stalls your neuroplasticity.
And this leads to a profound philosophical point from the panel: cognitive friction. Things like wrestling with a tough book, debating a really complex problem, or even just navigating interpersonal challenges. That is not a chore to be outsourced. It is an absolutely essential mechanism for our spiritual and intellectual flourishing. The panel warns that if we hand all our organic thinking and daily routines over to an AI, we lose the very essence of human life. We basically turn ourselves into mere data clerks.
Section 4. Safeguarding human identity. Beware the biased machine. This loss of friction ties directly into the dangerous misconception that technology is just a blank slate. We really need to explore why AI is absolutely not morally neutral.
The experts build a very clear picture of the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. An AI's output is entirely determined by its training data. First, it ingests massive text corpuses, mostly from the English internet and Wikipedia. Second, it assigns numerical weights to concepts based purely on how frequently they appear. Because it's trained on flawed human output, they explain that it inevitably inherits the dominant worldview, the biases, and the flaws present in that data. If you feed it violence, it outputs violence. And worse, as millions of users interact with it, those biases are just continually amplified.
So the crucial takeaway here is that AI demands our critical oversight. Right now, it's being driven heavily from the top down by a commercial focus on speed and profit, which often leaves ethics scrambling to play catch-up. The experts give a stern warning: if society buries its head in the sand with AI, the same way we kind of did with the rise of social media, we risk sacrificing our critical thinking and our social intelligence to automated, highly biased systems.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Thinking Biblically About AI, a Call to Stewardship. So how does the panel suggest we actually respond to all this? Well, they argue the answer isn't some utopian embrace of everything tech, but it's also not a dystopian retreat to the woods. It is a biblical call to stewardship.
The experts break this down into a highly practical roadmap for righteously stewarding AI. First, engage. Don't hide from it. Understand the tools and the math behind them so you can actively oversee them. Second, educate. They argue we must teach AI literacy, but it has to rest on a firm foundation of liberal arts, critical thinking, and a biblical worldview. And finally, elevate. We can actually use this technology to advance true human flourishing. The source gives us a beautiful example of developing AI-assisted robotics for skilled nursing, using the tech to serve the elderly and the marginalized who might otherwise fall through the cracks. The goal, they say, is to literally guide the math to love your neighbor.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final challenge based on the panel's deep dive today. Remember, AI is not a creator. It is a mathematical tool waiting for direction. So the question is, will you surrender your God-given critical thinking and your very human identity to a chatbot, or will you step up, embrace the friction of learning, and ethically steward this technology to advance true human flourishing? Thanks for joining me, and keep wrestling with the big questions.